The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 113. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona, this is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria. Today's episode, we are going to focus on pricing, something I'm actually really excited to be talking about. But first, a quick message from our sponsor. This episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show is brought to you by High Ticket Program. Any service business owner looking to reach seven figures suffers the same problems. When you start the journey, you're on your own, managing tasks, maybe a few team members. But as a seven-figure business, now you lead a team. And they're going to be executing for you day in and day out. Somewhere along the way, you have to hire, train, and manage these team members, even if you've never done any of this yourself before. And if you don't manage scale and growth at the same time, you can end up crashing under the weight of new customers or building an expensive operation you can't afford to keep running. If you want to avoid these problems and get past seven figures, then let's talk. Let me map out a plan for you of pain-free growth. I'd like to speak with you personally and tailor the plan for you. So text HTP to 602-698-7575. That's my direct line. Messages come directly to me. If you're serious about finally achieving seven figures in your business, text HTP to 602-698-7575. All right, I am pleased to be introducing today's guest. Mark Stiving is a pricing expert who loves teaching. Mark is a Ph.D. in pricing. He's been blogging about pricing since 2010 and had his first book published in 2011. His career started in engineering, then sales, a professor, an entrepreneur, a pricing executive, and instructor. And he's getting back to being an entrepreneur again. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Frank. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I share a lot of common threads from the academics, the entrepreneur, and back again. So let's start with this. Pricing, is it a science or an art?
Yes.
I kind of knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, the answer has to be both. The question becomes, which is the bigger piece of that? And it really depends upon the situation that you find yourself in. You could think of it as there are structural frameworks that you want to think through to say, here's how I'm going to look at pricing. But you're going to get to a point where you have to make a gut feel. You have to make a call.
Yeah.
And now how much do you know? How much do you understand? How good are you at those calls? And so it'll end up being both.
Yeah. So if one of the things that's tricky, and this audience is going to be the thing they're worried about, is service business owners have a hard time with pricing, because they don't have that sort of anchor of cost of goods sold that other folks often do. Where do they get started in trying to price their services?
Yeah, so I want to push back for a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I think pricing everything is exactly the same thing.
Interesting. Cool.
It doesn't matter to me if it's a service or a product or software. Now, there are characteristics about any of those things where you suddenly say, oh, this characteristic drives this pricing behavior or thought process.
Yeah.
So if I were going to price a service or a product, it's always how much is my customer willing to pay?
Yeah.
So that is the very first thing we want to think about. And now we say, well, how do I figure that part out? Right? How do I know how much my customer is willing to pay? When you say services and you're talking about a 6 to 7 figure type, let's say it's a consultant or someone who's doing one-off jobs. Now the problem really is I don't have a competitive comparison point. I have to understand how my buyer is making that decision. What do they value? How much value am I going to add to their life, their world, their job? There's a fantastic technique called a value conversation. And a value conversation essentially is me having a conversation with you where I say, what's the problem or what are the problems you're trying to solve? If we could solve this problem, what would the result be? Oh, we could move this metric from this point to that point. What do you think that would be worth to you if we could move that metric? And now I'm having a conversation with you to tease out what you think my solution is worth. It doesn't mean that I can charge all that, but it does mean that I have a really good feel for how much value you're going to get. And by the way, this is also a great sales technique.
Yeah. And you're focusing on this value-based pricing concept, which I absolutely love. Totally. This is the thing that I think a lot of people miss when they start thinking about pricing, is they're not even thinking about value. It's so interesting, though, that in order to even have this conversation, we as entrepreneurs have to be thinking in terms of the problem we're solving for people rather than the thing we're doing. Because a lot of times service business owners, we get caught in the whole element of, well, I'm a social media broker, or I do Facebook ads, or I train or whatever. And so we get sort of focused on the action that we forget almost completely about the value proposition or the thing that the client actually gets out of it.
Yeah. And I got to say that's so hard of a trap to get out of.
Yeah.
I find myself in that trap all the time. I'll say to people, oh, I'm a pricing expert. And in my mind, what I'm hoping is they say, oh, I really need a pricing expert to get me from this point to that point. Let me tell you, there's nobody sitting around saying, hey, I need a pricing expert.
Right.
Right. Just like there's nobody sitting around saying, I need a social media expert.
Right. Exactly.
There are people sitting around saying, I need more exposure. I need more leads. I need to win more deals at higher prices. I need to, right? So these are real problems that we can go solve,
Yeah.
But it isn't about saying, this is what I do, or this is who I am.
Yeah.
These are the problems I solve.
Yeah. So a lot of times the clients that I work with, when they kind of fall into the make money or save money bucket, these conversations are a little bit easier, right? Because they can have these conversations about the metrics. But what about the softer skill stuff? People who do human resources work, or people who do coaching, executive coaching or whatever. How do they structure these value conversations? Because they're probably asking their client to quantify things they've never really ever thought about quantifying before.
Yep. They just haven't figured out how to do that. Let me be super clear though. In a B2B world, I think everything we sell, you can quantify in dollars.
Yeah.
And if you can't sell it.
Right.
And once you shift to B2C, the exact opposite might be true, right? It's almost impossible to say, well, what's the dollar value of a new Mercedes? It's like, oh, what's the dollar value of the confidence that I'm going to feel when I have a new Mercedes? You're like, oh, okay, I don't get that.
Yeah.
But in B2B, if you can't put it in dollars, you're not going to sell it.
Right.
So let's pick one. Let's talk about executive coaches for a second.
Yeah.
Right? You're paying your executive $500,000 a year. What if I could make your executive, I'm sorry, let me not say it that way. Let's say that we did a coaching program and we were really effective. How much more effective do you think we could make that one executive? 1%, 10%? Yeah. What do you think it would be? And so you give me a number. Oh, I think I could make them 5% more effective.
Right.
Excellent. You realize 5% of $500,000 a year is $25,000.
Right. Right. So you are finding, again, one of the things you said, this is a great sales technique, and I love it because you're asking your client to connect the dots in their head on the value proposition. You're saying, what would this do? And then in turn, what would that do? And what would that do? And you continue to connect those dots until you land, and the budget, which is where it really has to be in a B2B space. I totally love that.
Yeah. And I would push back a little bit on the word budget, because budget implies how much am I going to spend?
Yeah, true.
So let's say that you make me, I know that you're going to make or save me $500,000.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you $500,000 to do that.
Right.
But I might give you 10% of that without thinking.
Right. Yeah. So you're able to articulate the return on investment.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the key.
That's right.
It's the return, their expected return from solving these problems.
Yeah. This to me is like the key element for so many entrepreneurs, because they don't think in terms of return on investment. And I really think this is a game changer. So many consultants and coaches and service providers for businesses, the moment they can start talking about ROI, the entire conversation changes in the sales process, in their marketing language and everything. And it's fascinating that it all kind of comes down to this pricing element.
Yeah. So one of many courses I put together is called Value-Based Business. And the reason I put this together is I started out as a pricing guy. I loved thinking about, well, how do people use price to make a decision?
Yeah.
But once you go down that path and you start thinking about, oh, people are looking at value this way, then you want to bring that back into the company and say, well, how are we, in a sales perspective, how are we communicating value to a customer, to a buyer? Yeah. From a marketing perspective, how do we communicate that value to our marketplace? From a product development perspective, how do we create products that actually have value in the marketplace that people are going to pay us for?
Yeah.
I think of pricing as creating, communicating, and capturing value.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, pricing does have this emotional element to it. It's really hard to get away from this. And so, there's a lot of people who are listening to this going, Mark, that sounds great, but there's no way in the world I can stand up in front of someone and actually say the words, get them out of my mouth that this is how much I charge. How are there ways through that? I mean, your clients must deal with this at some level. I mean, I think institutionally it's probably not as bad, but there's always fear of we're overpriced, we're going to lose business. How does one get through that emotional component?
Okay, I'm going to give you the answer right now, and then I'm going to tell your listeners, if you go to my LinkedIn feed and you search back a couple weeks, I put up a video with me in my kitchen giving you the exact answer to this question.
Okay, cool.
And so here's what you're going to do. You're going to pick up two items that you're really confident of. So I think I used a fork and a spoon. And I said, this is a fork. My price is $10,000. This is a spoon. My price is $10,000. And if you can say that over and over and over again, you just want to say, my price is $10,000, the exact same way you would say this is a fork.
Yeah.
Because it's a fork, right? There's no doubt it's a fork. Right? Why don't you know your price is $10,000?
Yeah, that's true. And the confidence that comes with, well, first of all, I love that you're talking about practicing, because I tell my clients to do the same thing, stare in a mirror, say it over and over a couple of times so there's not that hiccup or weird pause. That you've done it much better. You've got something to model, which you already know how to say something really confidently and say it again. And we're going to have Mark's LinkedIn link here in the show notes, so you can click directly through and dig up that video. But the confidence, it's not just a head game, because you've already had your client do all the hard work to actually understand what's behind the price, so that they're not just feeling like they're making up a number out of thin air. So it's I think some people think it's one or the other, oh, it's just a bravado thing. I just need to do some chest beating and then I can raise my price. But that you've had them do the hard work to actually think through the value proposition in order to provide them the confidence to be able to say that. I think those two things seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah, and let me add another piece to that. Let's pretend we're going to use $10,000 as the price for a second, right?
Yeah.
Let's assume that we find a client that's not willing to pay us $10,000. So what? It's not your client. Who cares? Right? Go find one that is willing to pay you $10,000.
Yeah.
So once you've picked your price, it's easy to say it.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Pricing it's exactly as you started the whole conversation, right? You price what your client is willing to pay. And there are going to be people who aren't willing to pay that. That's fine. Either the problem wasn't important enough for them, or, it was, it's not painful enough, or they're overly price sensitive, or whatever. It doesn't matter. There are going to be, if you've done the homework, there are going to be other people who feel like, yeah, that's going to work for us.
Yeah, it's just the wrong client. We call that market segmentation.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I want to pivot a little bit to the work you're actually doing. So what kinds of clients are you working with around this area right now?
Most of the time I work with tech companies. Okay. There are a lot of companies that are trying to move into subscription businesses nowadays. And subscription is so different than traditional businesses in terms of pricing, that there's a lot of hand holding going on there. I'm helping them out quite a bit on those.
That's great. And so even the larger corporations are having trouble figuring out what the price. It's not just the little guy.
Yeah. And what's funny is what I've been hearing lately is I don't know how to price my product in the world of subscription, but what they really don't know is what questions to ask. Because it isn't how much is someone willing to pay. It really starts out with, what am I going to charge for? How do I put my features in my good, better, best packages so I get
Right.
people to buy the right package for the right client? And so it's a really fascinating, difficult problem for people.
Yeah. The other thing, one thing I've definitely seen, especially in the subscription model pricing element, is because it's becoming a bit ubiquitous. I got lots of people doing this. There are some sort of mental models and theories people have about what pricing should look like. And I've heard a lot of executive conversations start off with, we need a price in the blank range. You know, it's almost like leading with the wrong thing. It's like we're missing a price point that's sort of in this medium range. And every time I hear that, I'm like, okay, time out. Like, we're talking about the wrong thing here. Let's zip this around the other way and flip the question around. So it is interesting, because a lot of people get flummoxed in this completely.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. People don't know how to think about this problem,
Yeah.
especially when you move to subscriptions, because here's one of the biggest problems with subscriptions. You think about buying from Salesforce, they charge you by the user.
Right.
You think about buying from Dropbox, they charge you by the gigabyte or the terabyte or the package that you're going to buy. And so what are you going to charge for? It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And if you take that back to physical products, and you start really thinking through this concept of a pricing metric, it's fun, because when you buy coffee at Starbucks, you buy a coffee at Starbucks.
Yeah.
But there are some coffee shops in Europe that charge you by the hour instead of by the coffee. What are they what's the metric that we're going to sell you something by?
Yeah. And they've done the thinking to connect it to the value proposition, which is, it's not about the liquid in the cup. It's how long you're hanging out using the Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
All that stuff.
Exactly.
That's great. And it's interesting. The value proposition question is kind of all over the place. We're seeing a lot of industries rethink what that value proposition is completely from scratch. And because so many, in software especially, right? What's the cost of the byte flying across the internet? It's really forced us to rethink, again, pricing, because we've lost that sort of traditional approach. There's not a widget over there with a supplier, and an invoice. Yeah.
I think software companies have a huge advantage over hardware companies, in the sense that hardware companies, even today, they can't get away from cost plus pricing. They can't move into this concept that says, I want to charge based on value.
Yeah.
Where software companies can't do cost plus pricing because the costs are so low, they would never make any money.
Right.
So
yeah, there's just nothing left. If
right.
you got to move on to a completely different model. So can you walk us through what like a typical engagement looks like when you're working with a tech company? How do you start? What are some of the milestones and deliverables that you typically have?
Yeah, so I have, I'm a very unique company, and it's in the sense that I'm the only company that only does pricing education. I don't do consulting.
Oh, okay.
Now, by education, I have courses that are online. I come in and I'll do a course with you specifically or personally for a group full of people. But I'll go so far as I do mentoring programs. So I'll take someone under my wing and work with them for 3 months to a year, just to help them think through the problems. I've done this enough times that I know the issues you're going to face.
Yeah.
And to me, the difference is I don't do the work. I just make sure you're doing the work properly, right? I make sure that you can figure out how to do the work.
Yeah. Well, that's smart. I mean, that's a lot more scalable anyway. I mean, that's music to my ears. I mean, that's what I would typically tell them. That's great. The educational component of that, do you find that, are you going into organizations where, you've got kind of a buyer of the educational program, and then other people are having to participate in it? Or is your buyer typically the same as the user, I guess, of the one who's actually going through the process?
I would say most of the time the buyers and the users are overlapping a lot.
Okay.
It's pretty common for me to teach in a product management or a product marketing space.
Mm-hmm.
Usually companies don't have that many pricing people that they want taught by me. So they really want to know more about value and how to get the right decisions around the products and the marketing pieces.
Yeah.
And usually it's a director of product management, director of marketing, or someone like that who's going to drive the purchase.
Right.
And from that point, it's all of their employees, and they'll open it up and invite a bunch of people to come.
Yeah, that makes sense. The product management seems to usually have, if not the role for setting the price directly, at least for the role of articulating the value proposition, which is where this is all kind of based out of. That's great. That's amazing. What's the next big challenge for you? Like this year with your company, anything exciting going on or things you're launching?
Yeah. So at the end of last year, we started a online education program, which was fascinating. And I knew I always wanted to go subscription, but I didn't, because I didn't feel like I had enough content.
Okay.
We got to 3 courses released. We're about to release the 4th course. And so I finally feel comfortable enough saying, okay, let's offer the subscription. So we turned this whole model into a subscription business, way more affordable for our clients. And now I have to eat all that dog food that I talk to people about in the world of running a subscription business. Right. So we'll see how well we can pull that one off.
That's great. Oh, that's exciting. That's it's exciting when from a content, as a content creator, content generator, to get sort of past that point, you're like, actually, there's quite a bit of stuff here. We got some good stuff. Well, that's really exciting. Mark, thanks so much for spending time with us. We're out of time, unfortunately, but people want to connect with you, learn more about the educational work you're doing and more about how to price better. What's a great way for them to connect?
Sure. My email address is mark@impactpricing.com.
Okay.
Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I almost live on LinkedIn, so I make comments there constantly. And if you're interested in the new subscription program we have, I've got this fantastic deal. What you're going to do is you're going to go to the website insider.championsofvalue.com. That's where our online education school is. Use the promo code INSIDERNOW. And what I normally charge $100 a month for, you can have the first month for $5. And it doesn't bug me if you sign up and then quit. I just want you to go try it, see that you like it, give me feedback. If you're going to quit, give me feedback, would you? Right. But go do it. I'm thrilled. I want more people to know pricing.
Awesome. That's an amazing offer. Thank you. So the links are here in the show notes page or below the video. If you're out and about listening to the audio, come on back to the show notes page and click on through to connect with Mark. We've got both his LinkedIn. We got his email in here as well as his LinkedIn link and the link through to the program. Mark, thanks so much for being with us. This is a fascinating discussion. I loved it.
Thanks, Frank. It was awesome.
And thank you for being with us on the 6 to 7 Figure Show today. I've been your host, Frank Bria. Just a quick reminder, if you want to talk about getting your business past the 7-figure mark, send me a text HTP to 602-698-7575, and we'll come up with a plan together. That's HTP to 602-698-7575. That is my direct line. We will see you on the next episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Make it happen.